errors that are marked with a G have to do with grammatical sentence structure. These are considered to be major errors, and so you want to pay particular attention to them. When I mark G1, it is any of the subject-verb agreement problems. For G2, primarily it has to do with form, sometimes whether or not your tense is appropriate, and subjunctive mood, which we'll look at. Pronouns, pronoun antecedent agreement, and case are important. Sentence fragments and sentence run-ons are also errors that you need to be aware of. So let's look at these individually. Subject-verb agreement, we say that both have to be either singular or plural. So we make sure that they agree that way, singular or plural. Obviously, there is the standard. Sometimes when we have words between the subject and verb, we forget and don't really pay attention to what the subject is. When we have subjects that are joined by and, we oftentimes forget that that means together they are considered to be plural. If we have or nor, then the subject is considered to be singular. Indefinite pronouns, let's look at those briefly, but indefinite pronouns, these are considered to be singular. And this is really important because not only does it affect subject-verb agreement, but it also affects pronoun antecedent agreement. The trick to this, even though we say these and represent a group, if it ends in body or one, think of it as singular. If it ends in body or one, it is singular. So be aware of the fact that you need to let your subjects and verbs agree based on that fact, and your pronouns and antecedents. Again, be aware of subject-verb agreement. It is an occasional problem, but if you have questions, this is something that you can access easily from the online writing lab at Purdue. Verb forms and tenses. We have irregular verbs, lie and lay, the es and ed ending, tense, and subjunctive mood. Irregular verbs, occasional problems with those, lie and lay, occasional problems, but I do want you to look at tense. I also provide a link to information about tense on the essay website so that you can go there to see. There are several different tenses, simple tenses, perfect, progressive, and I'll have you look at the website on the web page, the essay web page, for you to see how those are used differently. My apologies. One of the reasons that I have this information is on the website is because it's broken down in a way that I think you can use a little bit better. It tells you that verb tense indicates time and duration of the action of the verb, and it gives you the name of the tense, how it is phrased, when it is used, and sometimes signal words that are used in conjunction with it. The one tense that we tend to make the most mistakes with is the conditional simple that I have highlighted here, because we talk in terms of something that happened in the past with this helping verb would. So notice it means it might take place. So if I would go home in the afternoon when I was in high school, yes, I can use that construction, but if I'm telling about it as something that happened in the past, then I move to the past tense. So I went home after school every day. I would probably eat an apple, but that's something that might happen. If it was a routine action in the past, you want to move to the past tense. Again, this comes from the table of English tenses that you can access, and you can also access this information on the essay website. The one other issue with verbs that I want you to look at is the subjunctive mood. And basically, you use the subjunctive in an if-then construction. That's how we want to look at it. So notice how this works. It is the astronomers would be able to see the moons of Jupiter if the weather were clearer. So in an if-then construction, it is called the subjunctive mood. And you need to be aware that rather than was, you use were. In the sentence grammar vocabulary, part of what you needed to know was about antecedents and agreement references so that you would be able to understand the rules with pronouns. Pronouns and antecedent agree in number, that is, in grammar, singular and plural. It needs to be clear what the pronoun is referring back to. You need to have a noun or a pronoun that it refers back to, not just some general vague idea. You need to know when to use me and I, she and her, the nominative subject or noun case, I, she, and the objective case, me and her, object of a preposition, indirect or direct object, and when to use who and whom. And if you can use her and him correctly, you can use who and whom correctly just by substituting those in. Let's look at pronoun antecedent agreement. One thing is that they have to agree in number. If the noun is singular, the pronoun must be singular. Indefinite pronouns, again, these are considered to be singular, and therefore the pronoun that refers back to everyone, anyone, everything, everyone is to be singular. This is a major error. It's an easy thing to fix if you watch for it. The other thing is the fact that you need to make the corrections. Notice sometimes it'll be more than the pronoun that needs to be corrected. You don't have to always correct it by correcting the antecedent. You can reconstruct the sentence so that you take care of it. But again, the idea is the pronoun and the antecedent must agree in number, singular or plural. Whatever the noun is, the pronoun must be the same. And we do need particularly to be aware of indefinite pronouns that are singular. G3B is a common error. Primarily what you have to do is consider what the pronoun refers back to. The pronoun substitutes for a noun or another pronoun, like an indefinite pronoun. But when that pronoun refers back, it needs to refer back specifically to a noun or pronoun. Sometimes we imply a reference. Sometimes we have a reference that we have in our head but isn't in the sentence. So make certain that you have a specific noun or pronoun that the pronoun refers back to. Now, we can have a verb form, an ing form, that is a noun, a gerund. So running is my favorite activity. Running is a noun. Still, you have to have a noun or a word acting, or a word acting as a noun for that pronoun to refer back to. Same thing is true where it has the broad reference of this, that, which, and it. Make sure there is something specific. Make sure your construction is clear so that your reader understands what you are referring back to. And also, we sometimes use they, it, and you generally to refer to people. But again, you need to be aware of how you're communicating your ideas and make certain that your pronouns clearly communicate what you intend. We don't have very many problems with adjectives and adverbs, and I'll address those individually as we come across them and collectively if there's enough of a problem. Sentence fragments is an issue some of the time, but so do be aware of this kind of error. A sentence fragment is basically a group of words that doesn't communicate a complete idea. It may be a dependent clause. Make sure that you look carefully. One way that you can correct for this is to read the sentence, read between your periods and stop. check to see that it is a complete sentence. You can repair it by many times simply adding it to a sentence, a full sentence, or another group of words. But be aware of the fact that sentence fragments are groups of words that do not communicate a complete thought. They may have both the subject and a verb, but that is not a complete thought. It does not mean that it expresses a complete thought. If you'll notice over here, subordinate clauses, which are groups of words that are dependent clauses. You can have phrases, other word groups. We do have acceptable fragments, and you read those in popular literature and in fictional literature routinely. But for our purposes right now, we want to write complete sentences, and then we'll be able to manipulate that a little bit later. But right now, complete sentences are something that you need to make sure you're writing. The last thing that we're going to look at is run-on sentences. And basically a run-on sentence is a group of words that acts like one sentence. That is, there's a period at the end, but it is actually more than one sentence that has been written that way. When we look at run-on sentences, basically we need to know how to correct them. So here are 6 ways that you can correct run-on sentences. You can put a period where the first idea ends, separate the ideas. You can join them by putting a comma and a coordinating conjunction if the ideas are of equal value. You can use a semicolon when the second idea continues the meaning of the first. You can use a semicolon and a conjunction, such as however, instead. When the second continues the meaning of the first and the conjunction shows the relationship between the ideas. You can use a colon, which is many times preferable to the semicolon, when the second group of words, complete idea, explains the first group. Or you can make one of them a dependent clause. That is, you can reconstruct the sentence. The textbook tells you that run-on sentences are independent clauses that have not been joined correctly. An independent clause is a group of words that stands alone as a sentence. When you have 2 independent clauses, you either join them with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, with a semicolon, or a colon. That is preferable to a dash. The idea that sometimes they're fused, which means simply that you've written them as one sentence and haven't done anything to show where one ends. Comma splice is when we use a comma where an end mark should have been used in either of these cases. So again, the idea is how do we correct them? We can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, a semicolon, a colon. We can make the clauses into separate sentences, or we can restructure the sentence by subordinating one of the clauses. Again, the idea is that you need to be able to recognize these, read in your paper, read from period to period, and see if you actually can recognize when you come to the end of an idea. The G errors are major errors. Subject and verb agreement, verb forms and tenses. I afford you a little latitude on some where you're stretching. Pronouns, look for those indefinite pronouns. Make sure there's a clear antecedent. Sentence fragments, make sure the group of words written as a sentence is a sentence. Run-on sentences, make sure that you have only one idea written as a sentence rather than more than one.